This is ustwo. We're a digital product agency. Sorry, digital product studio. God, get it right. We've got 4 studios. I think this is a little bit out of date, actually, but more like 300 people now, and quite a diverse crowd. And we're independent, one of the few independent studios of our kind. These are our things. Has anybody heard of our products like Monument Valley or Rando or Whale Trail? Anybody, any fans? Cool. Just in case you hadn't played it, there it is. Has anybody heard of DICE? We sort of incubate ventures here, and so if there's a good idea, people can make a go of it, get funded within the company, and then launch out on their own. And this is a disruptive way to do gig tickets. If there's any music, live music fans, I suggest you check it out. I hear it's very cool. Some of our clients also a bit out of date, which makes me think I probably shouldn't suggest the newer ones. There's Google. Oh, cool. Oh, that's the end. Perfect. On to the Mac stuff. Oh, lovely. So, hello, I'm Seb. I'm the IT manager for London at ustwo. Hi. So I'm going to be talking about, because I didn't know what else to talk about, Monkey on AWS via Docker Cloud. There's lots of buzzwords in there. Docker Cloud, I think, was renamed from Totem just a couple of weeks ago or a month ago. And I should say this is very much still a work in progress, not only because I finished my slides about 3 minutes ago, but also me and the team are actively developing this. So at ustwo, we've been using Monkey, as I'm sure many of you guys have, for over 3 years. I say over 3 years because I asked the team, and no one predates that period, and it was just here when we arrived. So it's been in various states of disrepair, and we've been trying to make sense of it during that time. I've been at ustwo for a year. LinkedIn told Stuart that it was my work anniversary today, which I'm very happy. So, as I'm sure most of you, it's sort of the most common case for Monkey is one local server, and you push out your software packages and various bits of configuration that way. We've since grown to 4 studios, one in Sweden, one in New York, and one in Sydney. And the way we kind of handled that was 3 Monkey repos. Sydney's not quite large enough to have much internal infrastructure. So I think this is kind of a well understood solution. They're Monkey repos, they're R-synced, and the sort of thorny thing is you have to configure your sort of local clients to point at the right, the nearby repo. So they're kind of not pulling from the other side of the world. And there's very many clever ways to do that with Puppet or something. So that's what we were using until very recently. And when I came on, we kind of wanted to send Monkey into the cloud, mainly because we're desperate to reduce the IT infrastructure here. And the 4 studios, we expect that to grow. As I'm sure for most of you, the workforce is becoming increasingly mobile. The fact if you have a local Monkey server within your LAN might not actually do you much good if most of your clients are out in the wild. And lastly, we're a development tech company, and doing things the old way, not involving cloud, seemed very passé. So we had to get on that. So to talk, our criteria for what we wanted out of Monkey in the cloud was, it had to be scalable, had to get past that problem we had before of like, we've got a new studio over here. Okay, we have to set up a new Monkey server over there, so it'll be us syncing. If you're going to have a Monkey repo on the internet, it's hosting software images, and if you don't want to sort of open yourself up to liability of, software piracy and things, you better make sure that repository of images and things is secure. So it needs to be secure. And we wanted it to be globally performant. I mentioned our locations earlier. Um, we needed to be able to service everybody equally. Um, so we immediately thought, maybe some sort of CDN, content delivery network, leverage that stuff, which the big boys do. Didn't really know how, but that's what we wanted. Um, and it should stay, easily manageable. As I'm sure most of you have a diverse team of different skill sets. Um, you don't want to have, you know, just one guy who can look after the monkey. Well, maybe you do actually. I think there's a valid use case for that, but it'd be good to be able to share the load with at least one other person. So we were still hoping to get the web tools, the GUI tools, the things we were used to. So the first thing probably you might be thinking of if you've got this set of criteria is Simian. Has anybody heard of Simian? Anybody using Simian? That's always the thing, isn't it? No one uses it. Apart from Google. So Simian, if you don't know, it's a variant of a fork. Could you call it a fork? I mean, don't want to get hung up on terminology, but it's Google's way of running their monkey service, and they host it on their platform as a service, Google App Engine, and the Google Mac operations team developed this, and they use it to manage their enormous fleet of Macs. I still think it's the largest in the world. Anybody want to correct me on that? No. So Simian looks like a good thing. Positives. We know it scales. I think at Macaduck, Clay said there was something like 72,000 Macs in the Google fleet at his last count that morning before he did his talk. So we know we're not going to hit that scale. So we know we're not going to hit the ceiling. Out of the box, as it were, you get the security elements. It's both SSL secured, and your clients are also secured individually. We'll come on to that more later. Part of the Google App Engine offering is it auto scales, and it's kind of auto global. It takes care of the distribution and makes sure you're sort of pulling the data from the closest data center. You get all that built in. Another positive is it has a web interface. So, at first glance, it looks like this is, pretty easy for the team to get hold of, get a handle of. And it also comes with some additional features which you don't get in sort of normal Monkey. You get dynamic manifests. So if you're used to working with static manifests, you can start to do some more clever things to sort of take some of the load off. But in our evaluation of Simian, there's also some negatives, and we found that Google App Engine itself was a bit of a negative. We have developers here. We tried to talk to them about, anybody got any experience with Google App Engine? Because we're finding it a bit difficult. Can anybody help us? No, in a large number of devs. Basically, we found Google App Engine to be a real barrier to entry. We had to learn a lot and try and get it working, and it's just quite tough. The workflow also, it's not as simple as what we were coming from with normal Monkey. There's a lot of sort of generating package info files on your machine and then uploading them into the web interface, sort of by copy and paste, and then uploading the individual image files or DMG files. So not really that sort of seamless workflow that we were used to. And then these sort of next 2 points are sort of what I sort of term as just it's just comes from it being quite a niche solution, in that there just aren't many people in the Mac admin community using it. You can't really reach out to people and say, basically, we found the documentation seemed to be a little bit out of date and wasn't quite there, and the support, as much as Google did a really good job of trying to help you and very appreciative of that, there's just not the user base of, say, Monkey. And we weren't able to use things like Auto Packager and Monkey Admin, which we'd really grown to love in the old ways. So what else? Well, there are a couple of people on the internet trying to do like monkey as a service. Um, and when you dig a little bit deeper, they're not really doing anything clever, and you immediately start to think, well, I can do that myself. So then it becomes, well, you're going to do it myself on some sort of cloud platform. Um, and as to our DevOps people, you know, their belief is AWS first. If you don't have a compelling reason not to use Amazon Web Services, use Amazon Web Services because that's what we're all comfortable with, and that's where we'll be able to help you. And so we fell into line. Not that we didn't want to try. So AWS, we were going to build our monkey infrastructure on AWS. Is anybody using AWS for bits and bobs? How to play? Made a server? Yeah, it's fun, isn't it? So there's a whole plethora of things in AWS. There's lots of things to play with, but what's pertinent here is Elastic Cloud Compute. Is that what it's EC2? Is that what that all stands for? So that's where you put your servers. We're going to put our web server there. There's S3 Simple Storage. So SSS. I forget all the acronyms. S3, Amazon S3. That's where we're going to put our storage. That's where we're going to put our files, our packages, our DMGs. There was also this compelling thing called Amazon CloudFront, and that's where they manage the global distribution of your storage. And so we thought, well, if we were able to make that work, we can get that kind of CDN thing we were looking for. So we were looking at all this and we think, yeah, this is looking good. We can start to put this together. And then we remembered about that security thing. We were like, oh yeah, how are we going to do that? So just to pause on the mention of monkey security, if you look on the monkey wiki, there's two options, a section called securing the monkey repo. You can use SSL client certificates, where you have sort of a perfect trust. The client is able to trust the server, but also the server is able to trust the client. Both ways. Usually when you're just going HTTPS, you're able to trust the server, but the server doesn't really care who you are. In a software distribution way, it'd be nice to do both. Or you can do basic HTTP auth. If you've gone to a website and a little drop down pops up and says what's your username and password, it's just basic HTTP auth. So SSL client certs, this would be our preferred way, the full trust, but it requires something called a certificate authority. And Ben's done some good talks on this, so won't cover all the nitty details here, but nitty gritty. But it's, if you don't already have that somewhere, it's no small undertaking. And we weren't able to leverage something that already does this for us, like Microsoft Active Directory or Puppet. So we were going to have to add this as like, this was coming like a blocker to the whole project. And it might have been our technical knowledge, but also we just couldn't find a way to kind of get it to work with the various components of AWS, such as CloudFront. The documentation just didn't really seem to be there. So as it was proving such a headache, we just said, well, okay, SSL client certs, that's what we want to do. But for now, we're going to revert to HTTP, basic auth. It works. We'll revisit this whole client cert thing later. So just a bit of a get out clause there. But there were still some issues we had with AWS, even though we were now using this sort of simpler way of going about it. And that's right, you know, it can be quite intimidating, quite opaque. Suddenly you've got a monkey server that's in the cloud, and if people have got problems, the whole team don't quite know how to, you know, well, where is that thing? It's just not really sort of so understandable, and the interface is, it's not really, you know, there's not really great UI there. You know, how do we address some of these things? You know, how can we make this easier or turnkey? And for that, we basically we had two components. For the server side, we used Docker images. The web server configuration is very simple, and so it can be baked into a Docker file, a Docker image, and that takes away some of the complexity. And now it can also be managed by Docker Cloud. And then for the storage component, we're basically going to use a local file server, but we're going to synchronize it with S3. And there's a lot of software apps that do that. And particularly in our case, we've got our Monkey repo on a Synology. Synology have a package that you can just add on, download, say, I want to synchronize this folder with Amazon S3. And if there's any changes, it just synchronizes all the time. It's been very straightforward, very robust. So I'm just going to show you a bit of beneath the covers now. One moment. Is that coming from upstairs or is it from these speakers? Yeah. So small implementation detail. Also, we haven't quite conquered the whole CDN aspect. So for now, we've done some speed tests and latency tests on the various Amazon regions, and we've just gone with, for now, the one that's most performant for on average for our locations. So I'm going to show you our AWS management console. This is the EC2 dashboard. We've just got one instance in here because it's not a very popular region for us, but it is good for this. I'll come back to this later. S3, Monkey, repo. So I'm sure you're all very used to this. Here is the Synology package. If you're a Synology user, it's very straightforward. It's a GUI. And then what this allows us to do is have a Mac running auto packager, Monkey Web Admin. It talks to the Mac. It doesn't know any difference about the cloud aspect. The Mac saves to the Synology storage, and then this agent just syncs it to the cloud, which we think is rather cool. Onto the web server side. This is our private Nginx S3 proxy. So this is effectively a Debian image that is customized and just proxies with the HTTP auth and a few other things to S3. I would have loved to sort of reveal that we were going to open source this, but I spoke to some of our developers and our DevOps guy, and he really picked me apart. So before I do that, and I'm going to commit to doing that, but like I really have to take a lot of his points on board. So that's the Docker Hub, and then this is Docker Cloud, where you can provision nodes, Docker nodes. Sorry, this is rather rushed, or just rambling, whichever way you prefer. So this interface allowed us to make a Docker host in AWS. You give it some AWS credentials. It talks to AWS. It makes the EC2 instance for you, and then it allows you to configure your services. So here's that Docker image. It takes care of putting it on the AWS instance, make sure it's running. And this has kind of not conquered, but it's made easy. It's sort of that visibility aspect with the rest of your team. There's some things on here which I shouldn't click on because it's got sort of environment variables with SSL. Yeah, so I'd love to show you more, but maybe at this point I'll just stop, and I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, so I can sort of say questions, or really don't know how long I've been going on for, so it's probably time for somebody else to speak. Any questions?
So start off with on the authentication side, you said that Puppet wasn't an option. Why?
Not that it wasn't an option, it's just it wasn't there, and the drive to get this up into the cloud as quickly as possible. We didn't really want to embark on. I think we it's about training up the rest of the team and familiarizing. If you introduce another thing like Puppet into the mix, it just was slowing down an already sort of dragging project. So revert to HTTP auth.
Okay. Do you have any version control on your Monkey repo? Like in Git or something?
No.
Okay, so how do you control access to your Monkey repo? Or I should probably phrase that better. How do more junior members of your team contribute to your Monkey repo?
Well, I should say, you know, we're 5 guys, recently down to 4. So it's not very formal. I think we need to address that sooner rather than later. And it's not also a very sort of vibrant repo. Probably by your standards, it's quite slow moving and not terribly complicated. So it's not version controlled, and access is via human conversations.
Damn those people. When will you be releasing your S3 proxy? I only ask because I had to write my own yesterday.
Okay. Well, I'd happily show it to you in confidence, and I'll also show you the notes I've got from the developer, and maybe we can work on something together. But yeah, I'd give myself maybe a couple of weeks to a month before have it out.
And one last thing. Obviously, Google say that they spend $1 a year a Mac or whatever their figure is. How much do you guys spend on Amazon? To what you say, 300 clients?
Yeah, 300 clients last month. And also, I should say that the biggest sort of software package we deploy via Monkey is Office 2011. We're not on Creative Cloud Enterprise, so that's done by Creative Cloud for Teams. So it's outside of this, thank God. We spent $60 last month for the whole fleet. I expected it to be a lot more, to be honest, but.
Testing. Is this this isn't the throwable microphone like at Macaduck?
No.
Throw this.
You see the dents on the top.
God, yeah. So a couple of questions. HTTP basic auth. Was it basic auth?
Yes.
Can you go into a bit more detail about that? Because I haven't used that in Monkey because all of my Monkey setups have been local, not internet facing. So I just wondered, do you have to set up per machine accounts, or is it just one?
This is the big difference between the two. Broadly speaking, this is the difference between the two approaches: the SSL client and just basic authentication. Basic authentication is a shared password between all your clients, and if you look at your managed preferences plist, it's just a single key to add, or rather add an array, additional HTTP headers, basic authentication, and then the hashed version of your password. And Monkey will effectively do that password dialog box when communicating with the server. So yeah, obviously the shortcomings are if that password gets compromised, then you need to change it everywhere. And but we're aware of those shortcomings, and which is why we want to get back to the SSL client certificate place, but it's just a bit out of reach for now.
Okay. And then the other thing I was just going to ask, more general, how are you handling the backup of the AWS instances that you're running, and how many are you running per?
So at the moment, it's just a single instance in a single region. Again, the whole kind of CDN thing has been tabled for a little while, just while we get a. This is. We started sort of a pilot group of 10 machines to get an idea of the costs involved, and also just to see if there are any technical bugs. In February, that went fine, no showstoppers. So no, sorry, in January, and then February was our first sort of billing month, which I got the $70 figure from for sort of our uses that month. So yeah, it's still kind of early days. Feel a bit embarrassed showing it to you, but.
No, it's great. So are you backing up the EC2 instance using the snapshots?
Well, because this, the EC2 is it's just a Docker machine that runs Docker images, so it's kind of throwaway. That's the beauty of what this gives you. It's like we could very quickly move not only to a different AWS region if we needed to, but also we could move to another provider. This nodes tab. I don't know why this might happen, but you could say, actually, I want to move to what's the one with droplets? DigitalOcean. You want to move to DigitalOcean or something? I think there's a whole series of providers that this interface supports. So they're doing something quite clever here. You know, they're like saying all these people are now just commoditized suppliers of compute power, but we're putting this layer on the top, and we can automate getting images from your repos, private or otherwise, and just managing them. It does a whole lot more than we're not really interested in. Stacks, which is like a suite of services. I would say, actually, I think it's best because one, I don't really understand it, but also I think it kind of detracts from the simplicity of all this. But there's a lot of features. I think that this is quite a new service, and I'm sure service administrators could be able to pick it apart. But I think that they're trying to make a really sort of production, large scale services solution here.
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Hello, hear me? Cool. Hello, my name's Richard. I work for AMSYS. So I was asked to come to do a talk. So I thought, hey, iBeacons, that's what it's all about, yes. So out of interest, who's actually used iBeacons? Excellent. When all hands go up, it's like, okay. So iBeacons. I guess the first question is, what is an iBeacon? So an iBeacon, sorry, is a low-powered Bluetooth device. They come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And basically, they're just there to send a really low-powered signal out, which an iOS device can use for proximity information. Okay, so they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. So these are some of the more common manufacturers. Estimote have been around since day one, really. They got a quite nice design. Gimbal are quite popular. Two Canoes, they got a USB-powered iBeacon as well. So we go through this later on, but basically the idea is these are small Bluetooth devices, no more than about an inch in size. And they're there basically to give us proximity information, which we can then, or an iOS device can then basically trigger an event. And what that event is can be anything. Okay, so we go through some examples. But if we just kind of recap a bit on basically how iOS gets kind of location information. If you've got an iPhone or kind of a cellular iPad, the first fallback for any location information are the cell towers. Okay, so these devices have a permanent connection to these towers, unless you live in Kent when it's a bit patchy. Apple kind of crowdsource all the information about all these towers around the country, and from that connection, you can get a kind of rough idea about where you are. So the proximity is between maybe half a mile to a couple of miles. This is probably one of the quickest location fixes an iOS device can get. So it's pretty quick, but not that accurate. So the fallback then is Wi-Fi. If you have iOS, if your iOS device has got Wi-Fi turned on, the device will actually constantly scan the local area for any kind of known Wi-Fi networks. And if you live in London, you probably know that there are hundreds of Wi-Fi networks, both visible and invisible. And this is a screenshot of our training building this morning, and this is only half of them. So this, again, is all crowdsourced. And for this information, again, the iOS device can roughly work out maybe within about 10, 15 meters, 20 meters, where that device may be based on the networks it can see. Okay, so that's the next fallback. And then finally, if you've got an iPhone with GPS or an iPad, it'll use a GPS signal. So you also need kind of direct line of sight to satellites. This is one of the slowest pickups for kind of proximity, but most accurate. Okay, so you can get you actually down to maybe half a meter or so. So this is what we got, but what we don't have really is kind of indoor location kind of services. Something with GPS. If you can't get a line of sight to satellite, or if you're inside, it's a no-go. So this is basically where these iBeacons come into play. So got a quick animation. So basically, all these beacons are very small, low-powered devices that send out a signal, basically. So it's a unidirectional signal. It's one way. So there's no communication back from your iOS device to the beacon. It's just one way. They basically broadcast a signal. And within that signal is embedded a unique identifier. And that identifier is used to identify which beacon your device is close to. And from that, it can work out kind of where you are, basically. So that's kind of like the idea behind these. So it's all about proximity. One of the drawbacks is you need an app installed on iOS for this to work. Okay, so you can't just put beacons around and get them to spam your iOS device. It'd be great because they'll send adverts out to anyone who walks past. So you do need a custom app that will understand your beacons and can respond to that. Okay. Unlike other Bluetooth devices, no pairing's required. Don't need to pair them up. It just the iOS device was passively listening for these devices, which means it can listen to more than one. So if you have a room for these beacons, they'll all get picked up. Your app will be told about which beacons have been discovered. And normally they get sorted in kind of distance order as well. So you can kind of work out which ones are the closest and so on, basically. So it's all based around Bluetooth. I won't go through what Bluetooth is, but the key thing really is it's all based around kind of Bluetooth low power. And this is what makes it possible. Most of these devices are battery driven. Most manufacturers claim 2 to 3 years life expectancy of the batteries, depending on how you got them set up. But it's Bluetooth low energy that allows you to have these kind of small devices, which does put kind of limitation on what sort of devices the users can use to pick these up. So on iOS, certainly, it's the iPhone 4S or the iPad 3. Anyone running older devices than that? Okay, that's good. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so that's one of the limitations, but obviously not for this group. And being Bluetooth, the typical range of these devices is about 30 feet. And theoretically, Bluetooth supports 200 feet distance, but that's kind of best scenario, which probably never exists basically. So you're talking typically 30 feet. Okay. So the way these work is you place these beacons in strategic places where you want to identify a proximity. And then as an iOS device gets close to that beacon, iOS will pick up that signal and it will send the signal to identify the beacons and inform your app. And the app has got two ways really of identifying how close you are to a specific beacon. The first one is region monitoring. So we go through this, but basically you can set up regions, or Apple set up regions, and as the device enters those regions, you get informed, and as you leave those regions, again, you get informed. So you can actually monitor enter and exit in these regions. Or we've got ranging, which attempts to inform your app in meters how far away you are from that specific beacon. Okay, so when it comes to the region monitoring, Apple got some APIs in iOS. So since iOS 7, this is when iBeacons was kind of introduced. Some APIs for kind of proximity location services. And Apple defined 3 zones, basically. You've got the immediate, the near, and the far zones. So as your device approaches a beacon, your app's going to be told about it, and it's going to tell you what region it thinks the device is in. So for immediate, basically, you're literally up close. You're almost touching that beacon. So it's you're very, very confident that you're very, very close to this device. Okay, so almost in contact with it. I did think at AMSIS we could have maybe an iPod on the wall, and then we can implant beacons into the staff. And as they walk past, we can sign in and sign out. But I think for health and safety reasons, for some reason it wasn't allowed, so never mind. So you've got the immediate one, you've got near, so when it gets to the near region, you're fairly certain you've been a couple meters of that beacon. And then if you're far, you're more than a few meters away from it, basically. So your app will be told which region you're in, and as you enter or exit these regions. So the journey of the device will actually go through the region. So as you get closer to the beacon, you obviously start with the far one first, get into the near one, and then get into the immediate one if you get really close. And what you do is really down to you. So maybe when you hit the far region, you may send like a welcome message to the user. Okay, if you're maybe a shop, you say welcome. But then when you get to maybe the immediate zone, you can do something completely different. So maybe you've got like an art gallery where you've got beacons around all the paintings, you've got a custom app, and as you get near a particular painting, the app could bring up some information about that painting, video, text, or something like that, basically. So that's one method we got. So you haven't got much control over these. These are defined by Apple, but they kind of work. The next option is ranging. So with ranging, the device attempts to work out in meters how far away you are from the beacon. Now, this is all based on the strength of the signal. So you can imagine this is kind of hit and miss. So you've got direct line of sight. This is actually pretty accurate, but as you start introducing walls and all sorts of kind of obstacles, this can go a bit awry. But when it works well, and it means because you're getting a distance in meters, you can define your own regions and do whatever you want to. So you've got much more flexibility on what you do. Okay, so that are 2 options baked into iOS. So one thing you need to be careful about is really how you place these. These are just wireless, transmitters. They work on 2.4 gigahertz, so which is a channel that a lot of devices use. So you need to think about where you place these. All sorts of things can block them: walls, doors, even kind of human bodies. We're just basically bags of meat and water, so we could block signals as well. So if you can deploy these, it's best to test them, and certainly test them in an environment that is going to match what your deployment is going to be. Okay, so I mean, the way they kind of work, if you've got a beacon, obviously what you really want is as you get closer, the signal gets stronger. As you move away, the signal gets weaker. So that's how it's going to kind of do the ranging. But if you've got, for instance, a wall between you and the device, that's going to block the signal. the signal is going to appear weaker, and obviously the iOS will think it's further away. So this is where you can place multiple beacons. Okay, you don't just need one. You can place them all around, so you get kind of direct line of sight to have maximum coverage, and then hopefully it kind of fixes that problem. But don't underestimate humans. You know, you could have a situation where you've got a nice open plan office, you place the beacons one evening, he's working late, and you place them all correctly, all work fine. And then when it came to actually production, the room fills up with people and they start blocking the signal. Okay, so this is where maybe you start placing them slightly higher, so you get them out of the range of the users or something. But again, you know, just make sure you do test these. Okay. So the way we identify the beacons, within the signal, there's an identifier. So the way iBeacons work, every device iBeacon has a unique identifier. The identifier is made up of 3 components, which together gives you a unique ID, so you can uniquely identify that beacon. So we have the UUID, the major, and the minor numbers. Okay. So the UUID, who's seen that sort of number before? Come on, everyone's seen that, yeah. So that's your typical UUID, which everything has these days. So the UUID is used to basically group all your beacons that you have, so for your entire company, because there's a good chance that other companies will have beacons, you know, placed maybe where your app is going to be deployed. So you need a way of differentiating your beacons from other companies' beacons. So you give your one's unique UUID, and that's your filter. If you want to generate one of these numbers, you've got the good old UUID gen command line tool just to create one of these. So that's your UID number. We then have a major number. The major number is used to group a set of related beacons. So these are related for some reason. So it may be, for instance, you may have an office with several floors, and you want to group each set of beacons on a floor-by-floor basis. So you give each floor, or the beacons on the floor, a specific major number, that groups them. And then you've got the minor number, which is used to identify a specific beacon in that group. So if you take something like AMSIS, for instance, we've got 3 London offices. So we could have a UUID that groups our entire estate together. We have major numbers for each of the offices, so unique major numbers, that's our identifier for the offices. And then we give the beacons and minor numbers to differentiate maybe different departments or floors within each office. So combined, you can uniquely identify where you are on a specific location, okay? This does bring up one issue then, because obviously you're identifying these beacons with these IDs, your app needs to keep track of them. And the last thing you probably want to do is to bake these numbers into your code, your application, because these change. You know, beacons go missing, you add new beacons, and the last thing you need to do is to keep having to update the app when you need to add new beacons to your state. So quite often, there's normally some sort of web service. So a lot of the manufacturers have a web service where you can store all your IDs for your beacons, and then the app can pull them down and refresh on a regular basis just to get an update. Okay. So that's basically how the IDs work. The other thing you can also do is you can turn your iOS device into a beacon. So it makes it a very expensive beacon. Okay, most beacons cost about, I don't know, $5 to $10. So if you've got an iPad Pro, you know, 1,000 quid, you can make that a beacon as well. And this will be quite useful if you've got maybe an iPad deployed that's got a static location, like a kiosk. You can turn it into a beacon, and so the app has to do that. So then the limitation is the app has to be in the foreground, but it can then broadcast a beacon while it's running. So if you've got a kiosk and you've got the iPad set to single app modes, that could be a possibility. And certainly if you go to the Apple stores, Apple use iBeacons a lot for their Apple Store app. Have you used the Apple Store app? So when you go inside, it kind of changes its mode to kind of in-store modes. They've got beacons all over the place, but they also sometimes use the actual the iPads on display as beacons as well, just to kind of help out. So that's an option as well. So generally, most of this is iOS based. iOS 10, a bit of a poor cousin with this. There's no official API from Apple for this. However, obviously Macs have Bluetooth, so there are quite a few third-party SDKs out there that give you kind of same capabilities. I picked a couple. Two Canoes. They've got various kind of beacon kind of products. They've got beacon hardware, and they've got this app called GeoHopper. Anyone use GeoHopper? No, it's quite a nice little app. There's two versions, an iOS version and an iOS 10 version. And it basically lets you set up triggers. So you can basically get the Mac to respond to a beacon event. And they've got loads of examples online. If you go to the website, they've got examples where they've got home automation. So you can turn lights on when your Mac enters a room. They've got an example where they get the iMessages to sign in and out as you leave a room, etc. So that's one example. And then you've got the Casper suite. It's got basically beacon support as well. So you can basically make your OS 10 policies beacon aware. So you can make them kind of region aware and activate them. So I think, David, you've used them, played with it, yes, and it worked, yeah? Yeah, it's cool, yeah, so it all works cool. So there are some opportunities in OS 10, but primarily it's a kind of iOS kind of feature. And then some of the manufacturers add kind of more kind of advanced features. So one thing that's quite common is securing your UID. Because by default, iBeacons do broadcast this in kind of clear. So potentially an app could use your beacons for their own purposes. I mean, they wouldn't gain much apart from just seeing your beacon. So some of the manufacturers actually allow you to secure them. So they basically supply encryption. So the IDs kind of rotate a bit. So they have an SDK that allows you to read that kind of secure ID. Some have a motion UID, which basically gets triggered when the beacon's moving. So you've actually got motion awareness now on some beacons, so which gives some interesting kind of options. Some have a flip to sleep, so if you turn them upside down, they turn off, and if you turn them around, they turn back on again. Some of the new ones have accelerometers, they've got temperature sensors. There's one that's got a compass built into it, so you get kind of direction access. Some of the estimate ones have an ambient light sensor, so when it gets dark, it power down, which can be quite useful. Most of them you can actually play around with the signal strength. Okay, so you can kind of raise that or lower that. And obviously these are battery powered, so that has an impact on kind of life. And also the signal frequency, how often this kind of ping is broadcast, this ID. So typically, like I think the default normally is about once a second is the kind of frequency, but you can, most of them you can kind of increase into 2 seconds, or you can reduce them down to maybe a tenth of a second. So obviously the smaller that frequency, the faster your app may pick up the pings, but also the battery starts leaking massively. Okay, so there are a few options you got. I went for some of the manufacturers. I've played with Estimate and Gimbal. They're quite popular. The Estimate ones look quite nice. They're quite sexy. The Gimbal ones are practical, but they've got really interesting and reliable kind of backend services. So they've got a kind of whole hosting solution for hosting all your IDs, and they've got an SDK for your apps to kind of connect to that. The Toucan one is an interesting one because it's USB. So you can actually power it from a USB adapter, where most of these are kind of battery kind of powered. And I love Estimate, but the Estimate ones, they're sealed units. So when the battery goes, that's it. You kind of have to either chuck them or kind of cut them open. Whereas the gimbal ones, they kind of come apart and you can replace the battery. Okay, so there's a few options, etc. So that's kind of the iBeacon side. It's worth mentioning kind of the alternatives. So Google also have their own version of iBeacon called Edison. It's very similar to iBeacons in some ways. These are the same devices. So most of these devices you can switch between iBeacon mode or Edison mode. And Google have SDK for iOS and iOS 10 for their version. So with Google, they've got two really flavors really. They've got a UID version, which is very similar to how iBeacons work. And they've got a slightly interesting one, which is based on a URL. So with the UID, if you go to iBeacons, if iBeacons is comprised of 3 parts, you've got the UID, the major and minor number. The Edison one is slightly smaller, but has 2 components. It has a namespace and an instance number. So the namespace is really the equivalent of the iBeacons UID. So they use that to group all your beacons, under your one umbrella. But because it's a small number, you need a small ID. So what most people tend to suggest is you generate the standard UID, and then you strip the middle 3 number portions, and that gives you your kind of namespace number. And then the instance number is used to identify the beacon itself, and this is equivalent of the major and minor number combined for iBeacons. So it's a number up to 12 characters, and then you can have some sort of format in there just to identify your specific beacons. So that's one mode. The other interesting one, though, is the URL mode. So you can switch it so the beacon just broadcasts a URL. to a web page or something. So it's a standard HTTPS URL. And what's interesting about this is you don't necessarily need an app installed for this to work. So with iBeacons, you need an app installed. But with this, things like Chrome support this. So you could have beacons broadcasting this URL, and as they get close, Chrome will pick it up and then go to that resource, that URL. So that URL could be anything. It could be a web page, a bit of marketing. It could be a web app, just an alternative. Okay, so that's kind of that. And I've got some examples of use cases. Anyone use Passbook or Wallet? Passbook, yeah. That's beacon aware. Okay, so a lot of kind of the airline places use it now, like EasyJet and Virgin use it on their kind of checkout centers. So as you go to the checkout, your tickets ping up on your lock screen. I said Apple use it for their Apple Store app. So it's got kind of two modes. When you get to the store, it kind of switches to this kind of in-store mode. Again, they use beacons throughout the stores. Both their typical iBeacons, and also they switch some of their devices to broadcast beacons as well. You've got retail. An interesting one is any baseball fans here? No. The American Baseball League have got a massive deployment of beacons. They basically saturate their stadiums with beacons. So there are beacons outside the stadium to guide you to the entrance to the stadium. That's where you need to go. It guides you to your seat within a certain stand. They've got beacons all over the stores. So if you go into a store, it prompts you with kind of discounts or promotions, etc. So they kind of heavily kind of use them. I mean, they can be used anywhere really. Anywhere you can kind of, you want to trigger an event based on location. You can use it for schools, maybe like student check-ins or something. Payments, conference rooms, anywhere that's kind of location aware. Could be interesting. My favorite one is Beacon Crawl. So this was an app, I think it's in New York actually. It's basically a pub crawl app basically. So someone set up a load of beacons around a load of pubs, and they built an app, and you could follow the trail and get discounts and access to special beers. That's quite an interesting one. So yeah, so we're down to your imagination on how this kind of works. I did have that weekend. I did knock up just to prove this works. Lastly, if I mirror a second. I did pray to the demo gods last night. So there's my phone. So if I turn this on, I've got a little app that picks up beacons, and I'm going to turn this iPad into a beacon. So if I can do it one-handed, 1 second. So Estimo have got an app you can download for free, and one of the things it does, it turns this into a virtual beacon. There you go. And it works. There you go. So that's me finished. Any questions? Hello. Well, soon I think now. Yeah, by popular demand. Right. Yeah, well, the other one I saw back 2 or 3 years ago, the UN in New York had it's an anti-landmine kind of what's the word? Not show. That's a bad term for it. But you know what I mean. They had a kind of anti-landmine awareness kind of exhibit. That's the word I'm looking for. Exhibit. And so they had pictures of various landmines that caused damage. And basically, you had an app, and as you went past each exhibit, the app would kind of simulate in pictures and that the damage that landmine would cause. So a bit graphic, but probably extreme sides.
I play with RFID stuff to show shoes, which is quite
Yeah, right, okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, which ones are these? Are they the Marquee? Yeah, Marquee, yeah. Yeah. I think that, yeah, they're the experts on that, I think, but yeah. I think the Casper option is quite an interesting one where you can have like location-aware policies, you know, so that gives you some interesting deployment solutions for your policies and location. Cool. Is that it? Thank you.
Hey, hello. This is kind of yeah, this is kind of your fault because nobody else had another talk, so I thought I'd fill up a little bit of time. It's going to be a little bit of time, so it should be cool. So a couple of nights ago, Apple had their event. Did everybody watch it? Everybody enthralled? Okay. Well, if you've all watched it, I'm essentially done. I was just gonna, yeah. As you've seen it, we've got iPad Pros, but not as big as the other iPad Pros. But they're not a mini, but they're not an iPad. They're not an Air. What's an iPad Pro? iPad Pro, not a big one. That's yeah, lovely. Uh, I mean, it's got some nice features. Borrows a lot from the iPad Pro, but the light sensing, and it's got some nice speakers and some good stuff like that, which will probably make its way into the bigger brother or whatever we call it, the large size XL, and as well as maybe the other iPads, which is nice to see a little kind of look into the future. We've got the iPhone SE, which is not a 4S and it's not a 5S, but again, I mean, for some, if you're starting rolling out devices and want to save a little bit of cost and you think people are happy with that, could be an option. We have these, which I think Graham's going to have one of these, or I was going to buy me and him matching ones. You know, just yeah, the watch bands, which yeah, actually yeah, there are colours. You know, but really for us admins, the whole thing was it was a really bit of a yawn, really, wasn't it? I think for a lot of the stuff that came out, we were expecting maybe new MacBooks or something, but we got that stuff. So other stuff did happen. You know, we got El Capitan 10.11.4, which was in beta for 8 revisions, 7 revisions, or something. And that seems to have been mostly okay. It's caused problems with people with Cisco IPsec stuff on their, yeah, deploying VPN profiles to it. And yeah, if someone's imaging with a 10.11.4 machine, they've sometimes had problems installing that via a profile. But obviously, Apple have had lovely APNS issues anyway with MDM enrollments. I don't know if it's still ongoing. I just know that it happened to me earlier. And then it's all really weird and sporadic. So, but of course, the page says it's green. The page is cool. Just static HTML. And with the new El Capitan, we also had Server App 5.1. I wanted to put another image up here which said OS 10 server, the server for everyone. And I thought that people might like that, but I just went with a horribly pixelated copy. But that's come in because of several changes that have come in. And we've had obviously iOS 9 and a nice little point release, 0.3. That brings a few things. If you look at the release notes for El Capitan, tvOS, watchOS, iOS, there's a lot of security fixes, a lot of CVEs, exploits that have been fixed, but obviously you then get your own kind of platform dependent features. So we've got Night Shift, which Well, we've got night shift. You can use passwords. You can enter passwords to secure notes now, which is quite cool. Especially as me and my wife share the same Apple ID. So I'm using this a lot now. But the big push with iOS 9.3 is really with the education market and a lot of the things they're bringing in. So there's actually an education preview where you can sign up your schools, I think, or your institution to start doing this stuff. Yeah, and it's still kind of US only. So it's a bit cheeky, a bit of a teaser, but the main kind of components within, so the main features of 9.3 might well be considered these. I think some of the kind of the big things on this, shared iPads. If you've used something like AirWatch before, you can kind of do shared device stuff. But yeah, this is something they're going to build into iOS and allow your MDM to manage. We also have something similar to Casper Focus if you use Casper, where it's kind of the teacher and assistant room thing. But Apple are quite adamant these are only going to be to EDU customers as well. So you kind of have to sign up for a program a bit like VPP and DEP, it looks like. I was going to kind of go through it a little bit more, but actually Richard, who just spoke, did a nice blog post, and then I copy and pasted a load of the kind of bullet points. There's a few more things. So you've got a home screen layout payload, all these all stuff for MDM that we can manage. Safari autofill domains, so passwords only filled on certain domains. Allow the radio service or not. You can block and whitelist apps, and you can also manage the notification settings. For a bit more info, just go to the AppSys blog. It's the there's a Swift post, and then there's this one. But it's just stuff that's coming in. But the main point, but it's all stuff that we've kind of got on the OS, but not yet. And there's a few weird things with that. So first up, if you are a school, oh, by the way, everyone say hi to Eric. Say hi, Eric. Hi, Eric. He's on Slack. His name's just Eric on Slack. He's one of those people with like 15 different handles, or maybe he has 2. But there are limitations in regards to what products can use the kind of these EDU iOS 9.3 features. So it goes listed in there. So if you've got a 3-year lease and you're an EDU, and you bought your stuff 2 years ago, you might end up with a bit of a problem, maybe. The other thing as well, whilst the stuff's in the iOS, the MDMs don't quite have the APIs and stuff ready yet. So yeah, sorry, I know I posted my own link. But you know me, a bit of self-promotion, I'm going to do it. So JSS 9.8.2 is iOS 9.3 0-day compatible. Same as what any MDM will say, because their MDMs don't have to change for the new stuff that's coming in. But the new features for iOS 9.3, all the classroom education stuff, is not going to be released till March 31st. And different MDMs are going to do this in a different way. Profile Manager within Server app, it looks like there might be another update because the stuff's not quite there yet, even though the iOS supports it. So I don't know if they're going to sneak a 5.1 or something out to release. I'm not sure what Apple are going to do with that. Jamf are committing to 9.9 being released on March 31st. AirWatch are offering custom profiles that allow you to do some of the iOS 9.3 stuff. And then they're also saying that they'll put the rest of it in a future release. So it's interesting. There's a lot of cool stuff there. If you're kind of in EDU, there might be a lot more that applies to you. But the whole sign-up thing, the whole slightly protracted release, you have it, but you don't. I'm not sure if this whole iOS 9.3 release was to then make it more of a public beta for people. There is some cool, interesting stuff there. There's a couple more features I've missed in iOS 9.3 as well, I think. Something like 3D Touch has got different notifications and stuff. But you know, it's the standard evolution that I think we've all kind of seen. Luckily, you know, if you're worried about El Capitan, luckily we haven't had new hardware delivered that only runs on El Capitan. At the same time, if you're looking to get new hardware, we haven't had new hardware delivered that only run El Capitan. But I'm very aware of time, And that was it. I just wanted to quickly run through it in case anybody didn't missed it and point out some bits. I said Richard's post on the MCS blog goes into more of those bullet points. 2 other points, and then we can bugger off. June. We want to do an event in June. We need a venue and stuff, as always. We do have Mark, and the guys at ITV have got us a venue. Well, 7th September, ITV South Bank. I think earlier he promised a presenter. He's promised a Holly to present. He said Holly. I don't think it's the Holly. I think it's a Holly. See, that's just disappointment. Sorry. But it'd be great to have a June event, and we're going to put up details about the ITV event a little bit sooner, because I expect that might be a little bit busy. I hope so. And you know the kind of recruitment posters where they go, "We need you," right? Could you just point at those guys? Just stand here and point. That wasn't. I was thinking of the army recruitment poster where they go like that. Yeah, there you go. So myself and Graham, we kind of set this up because we had a beer and a lot of people turned up. We just need help because we need someone who's a bit more organised and a bit more to help us out with it. And if one of us is on holiday or whatever, it falls to the other one. So we were like other people involved with running this thing, basically. So yeah, because you know what happens? We get busy and stuff. We want it to carry on and don't want it to not happen because we're not around, or I've broken another appendage, or yeah, because Graham's rubbish. Yeah, so and that's it. I promise.